Long before we were witnessing a war in Ukraine, I predicted, thanks to some really stupid policies from the administration and the Federal Reserve, that we would be looking at mass inflation. And what do you know? Here we are. The read today, unbelievable. I predict this now could send us into a recession, a bad recession, if we don't get this under control. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I'm Trish. Portions of today's program are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. Clearly, with all this inflation, there has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. So go to legacypminvestments.com today. Again, that's legacypminvestments.com. Let's talk about this read on consumer prices jumping 7.9%. 7.9%. I remember just a few years ago when you couldn't even get any inflation. We had a problem then, right? Because the Federal Reserve would never signal any kind of willingness to move on interest rates. And for whatever reason, that lack of signaling back in the Obama days left me believing that a lot of people were reluctant to put money to work in that period of time, only because they knew they could do it in another year or another 2 years. Now we got kind of an opposite problem going on, and you couple the fact that we've got a war that's going on in Ukraine, you add in the fact that we just banned Russian oil, which, by the way, I support, but my gosh, we better have an alternative here, folks, because it's now $4.25 a gallon. That's the national average, and I've predicted $9 by the start of summer driving season. Clearly, we are well on the way. Just to go through some of these skyrocketing energy and commodity prices are definitely pushing everything else higher. We're looking at the highest rate of inflation since January of 1982. You got to go back quite a ways when inflation was 8.4%. My goodness, we are almost there. And I predict that if this keeps up and they do not find an alternative source of oil in the here and now, we're going to be looking at upwards of 10% of an increase in consumer prices by late spring. Rising energy prices, rising food prices, all of this is taking its effect on the American consumer. And the problem we have now is that we could run the risk of getting ourselves into a Great Depression. A real depression. I want to point out that in light of everything that's going on, all the more reason to be thinking about how you allocate your funds, you allocate what you're investing in. Some of the proven things over time include real estate investments, because that's one way to help hedge against the inflation. The thinking being, of course, that real estate values go way up in an inflationary environment. And I anticipate that's going to continue to happen, especially in states that have favorable tax policies, places like Texas, places like Florida. You're going to see an appreciation in real estate there. So there's a company, actually, the CEO of the company is going to be on the program. The head of the company, I should say, is going to be on the program tomorrow with me, Charlie Dombeck. You may recognize him now. He's been on a few times. He's going to talk through his investing style. It's an investment that you can actually participate in, a private equity investment that's geared towards regular people, I should say. So I want to encourage you to take a look at real estate, to take a look at how you can use tax advantages in certain states to be able to improve your returns. To do that, you should go to keycitycapital.com/Trish, keycitycapital.com/Trish, and learn a lot more, because listen, you've got to prepare for a very different kind of environment. That is very, very certain. Inflation is spiraling out of control. I do worry that it's going to lead to a recession. And the reason I worry about that is because we're seeing a lot of what you call stagflation. In other words, very low growth. We're not getting the kind of growth that we need to keep up with this inflation, and yet very, very high inflation. And so logically you'd say, oh, well, you're not going to continue to get this kind of inflation if you don't have the growth, right? Well, when you have other factors that we can't really control, like the war in Ukraine, that's what actually leads to the stagflation-like environment. I mean, think about the 1970s and the Arab oil embargo, right? OPEC not selling to us. And that had a definite effect. I was a little kid, but I remember the gas lines. And we could be going back to that. We very well could be going back to that if we're not smarter about thinking about our own oil production and then being realists about oil around the rest of the world, right? You heard me say on the show a couple of times, Venezuela is close to us. It's less than 3 hours from Miami. They're sitting on the largest oil reserves in the world, bigger than Saudi Arabia. Why aren't we figuring this out? Why aren't we figuring out our own drilling here at home? Why haven't we green-lit Keystone? Because that sure would have come in handy right about now. But given this sort of desire to be all woke and, okay, we're going to go with green energy. By the way, I have nothing against green energy, okay, guys? But get it up and running. You can't in this amount of time. So we are stuck in this very treacherous economic position where American consumers, middle-class Americans, are going to get stuck having to pay way higher prices at the gas pumps. And I mentioned middle class, everybody's going to pay it, but it's the middle class that really gets hurt. And it's the middle class that's the backbone of our economy, that is the strength of the U.S. economy. Don't forget, consumer spending accounts for 70% of overall GDP. So if you don't have a healthy consumer out there spending, then what have you got? You've got nothing. I mean, talking about a sure way to make sure you see administration change come 2024, and actually, by the way, change come 2022. I'm going to give the Democrats a little bit of advice because I'm a charitable person. And actually, I just want what's best for America and Americans. Guys, you're going to have to encourage investment in energy drilling, traditional fossil fuel projects here in the United States for the sake of our social security, for our national security. By the way, social security as well. That's a whole other ballgame. They're spending $1.5 trillion, or they want to anyway. They want to spend all kinds of money because somehow the answer is just to spend more. Now I understand they want to give support to Ukraine, and I wouldn't stand in the way of that. But I would say, if you guys are going to do that, can we not get smarter about our own policies here at home, including the drilling? Including, okay, green energy. Get it up and going, okay? What are we sitting around waiting for? Yeah, I'm sick of watching Pete Buttigieg on his little, I almost said tricycle, on his little bicycle, biking to work while he's got his giant SUVs right behind him. I mean, the hypocrisy of it. Or even John Kerry flying up to collect his, environmental prize on his private jet and saying, well, you don't understand. I mean, I have real demands on my time. Like the rest of us don't. Come on, guys. Enough with the hypocrisy. If you're serious about green energy, go for it. But you can't do it onto itself. You got to do it in conjunction with everything else. So the drilling matters. And then I would add in, again, looking for other sources of oil. I hate that all these countries wouldn't take our president's call. That's really messed up. But we need to find countries that will take our president's call. You saw Maduro out giving a speech to his people this week, shortly after the 2 hostages, which I was the first to report would be released from Venezuela. Shortly after they were released back to America, he got out and he gave a speech saying, look, we want to work with the U.S. and with Europe to combat this. We need, by the way, I'm just saying this selfishly, we need to get the Russians the heck out of Venezuela. So close to us, we need to get the Iranians out of there. And I'd kind of like to get the Chinese out of there too. So there's a reason for us to be working with this country, helping them towards a free democratic process, helping them towards more free market capitalism, because these are things that would really put us all in a much, much better spot. But we got to get smart about this. Nobody is thinking really and truly about our future. And so we're going to be struggling with $9 gas if somebody doesn't get a handle on this. Now, I'm hearing good things. We'll see how this materializes in Venezuela, but I'm hearing good things from all sides. If some of those sanctions, or frankly, all of those sanctions dropped, you could get a much better situation for the American people economically. $9 gas is what we're going to be looking at. So bottom line here is we just need to be more thoughtful about our policy. I know Kamala Harris is over there trying to negotiate something. There's some video out of her laughing, of course, because I don't know why, but none of the consultants have managed to talk to her about the left, which comes across as what's the word? Rather juvenile, I would say, especially in light of everything that's going on. I think that she needs to strike a more serious tone. She needs to be more serious in general about this. Right now is not the time for politics. Right now is not the time for Kamala to show us that she's been to Europe. Right now is the time to actually drill down and get something accomplished. What that is not entirely clear right now. I think that there's no easy off-ramp for Vladimir Putin in this one. The destruction has been too awful with a maternity ward maternity hospital being bombed. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that just makes it hard to sleep at going on. And I do think that at some point we got to do an autopsy and look at why this happened, how this happened. I'm going to save some of my firepower for once we know more, because I do have my reservations about the administration and how all of this has been handled. But in the here and now, I would just suggest they do better. Okay, they've got to do better. They've got to really think strategically about this. I don't want us in a World War III situation. I also want to make sure that we're not seeing people slaughtered, innocent civilians slaughtered in Ukraine. Sanctions are a good step. Just make sure it doesn't hurt the American people, okay? Sanctions are a good step. Make sure you've got a way to backfill all that oil. That's my recommendation. And then, you know what, Vladimir Putin, he's got himself, some kind of new Afghanistan. He's going to be fighting there forever. He's going to have to deal with insurgents. He's going to have a completely bombed out country. I mean, who the heck wants it now, right? He's bombed everything and everyone. And you've got a population of people, though we're looking at perhaps the biggest refugee crisis since World War II, with an anticipated 5 million people that will flee Ukraine, you're still looking at an estimated 25 to 30 million people that will still be there. And those are people that don't want to be there with you in charge, Vladimir Putin. So he's now in a challenging spot because he wants to save face and he can't. He's gone too far. He has turned his country into the North Korea of Europe. And what you're going to find very soon, I mean, company after company after company, it took Coca-Cola a while, but company after company, they're all pulling out. So there will be nothing left. There will be no economy left in Russia. The oligarchs are getting sanctioned. Hopefully at some point this starts to put pressure on Vladimir Putin himself. Unfortunately, people are clever and they always seem to find these workarounds with sanctions, but all the more reason, going back to what I said initially, we've got to find our own solution so that we can cut Russia off. And we've got to tell the rest of the world, you're with us or you're against us, okay? Hey, China, you can't be doing business with the Russians and still expect to be doing business with us. Gina Raimondi, the Commerce Secretary, I compliment her on this. She came out with some pretty strong words to the Chinese semiconductor company, effectively saying exactly that. We've got to be strong in this moment in time. The world is at stake. I want to encourage you, by the way, I'm going to be on Locals, one of the platforms that I'm on, Locals, trishregan.locals.com. We're going to be talking about this live tomorrow on Friday. I do a thing every Friday with my little group. I'd love to have you join us. It's a really fun little group, and we're very committed to all the policies that need to change. You can join that discussion. Again, it's at trishregan.locals.com. I encourage you to go to my website, trishintel.com, where you're going to get much, much more on all the biggest stories of the day. And if you're watching this on YouTube or on Rumble, make sure you give it a like, and I'll be right back here with you again tomorrow. By the way, with Charlie Dombeck from Key City Capital. So I'm looking forward to talking to him. He's got a lot of thoughts on inflation right now. And inflation is off and running. I don't think it's going anywhere. I'll see you tomorrow.